Hi, when you're knitting in the round, there are basically two ways to start. One way is to make a tube, such as you might for a sock or for a hat, and one going down, one going up if you're starting at the cuff. Another way to start is to start at the center of a hat and make a flat disc, such as you would for a beret or for a shawl or for certain other things. You might want to start at a closed-ended loop. Here's one way to make a neat start to a circle. Start with your yarn with the tail coming to the right. Bring the yarn around and make a loop. Bring the yarn around and make a second loop. So now we have two loops. Take the yarn, bring it over the needle as a yarn over. So now the yarn is to the back of the work. Stick the needle into the loop, pull up a stitch. Make a yarn over, stick the needle into the loop, pull up a stitch. Make a yarn over, stick the needle into the loop, pick up a stitch. Make a yarn over, pick the needle in the loop, and pick up a stitch. I now have 8 stitches. Look at that, I have 8 stitches cast on. If you're working on double pointed needles, slide it to the other end of the double pointed needles. I'm working on a circular, so I'm sliding it to the other end of the circular. I'm going to do the first row of my work I-cord style. So I'm going to take my yarn, my needle, stick it into this first yarn over, take my yarn from the last stitch, and work a stitch. Let's make sure it gets off. This yarn is a little splitty. Pulling it snug. Work my next stitch. And so on until I have all 8 stitches knit. Now, in almost every lace pattern or circular pattern that starts with a circle, you alternate rows between yarn overs and plain knits. Fairly common way. So I'm here now, and now I want to show you I have my tail here, over here, and I have my 2 loops. And at some point, what you're going to do, now this is the problem here. This piece is not going to go away, which is the piece from the yarn over, from the I-cord. So we're going to bring this up because we're going to bring it to the back. We want to make sure it goes to the back, and that's what we're going to tighten up later. After we've done a little bit, we can ease these stitches down here with the tip of a needle and get them perfect. What I want to do is I want to take this, and I'm going to put it onto the cord to do it because it's a little easier. And I want to begin to pull my tail. And when I pull my tail, one loop gets smaller. Before I pull that loop all the way out, I want to go in and grab the loop and pull it and make the second loop smaller. And the loops sometimes tangle up. There we go. So now I have a big loop and a small loop. I want to pull this and make this a little smaller. I want to take the small loop, pull it, pull the loop that got smaller, and the result is this bottom loop gets small. I want to pull it snug. Then I want to pull the tail snug. Ooh! Our tail is now about 12 inches long, but we have a really tight, nice center. I'm going to take the 4 stitches and 4 stitches that are on the center of the cord. I'm going to pull the cord out so that I have them divided on the needle 4 and 4. And if you were working on double pointed needles, you could put them onto double pointed needles now. We have our tail. I'm going to put it to the back. We have our working yarn. I'm going to take the working yarn. I work with the yarn on my left hand, but at this point it really doesn't matter which hand you work it in. And now I'm ready to work an increase row. So I'm going to knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, these needles are not quite the size, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over. It's a fairly common pattern for 90% of the shawls or hats or things that start with an eyelet in the center. I'm going to continue and finish one round. And before I do that, I want to make sure I bring my yarn over and I haven't lost it. So I have that last yarn over on the cable. Now I'm going to knit one. Now, could I do it the opposite? Could I do a yarn over, knit one? Absolutely. You knit one, yarn over, knit one, yarn over, knit one, yarn over, knit one. Now, just to make sure that you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to do that next plain row. And as you see by now, we have 8 stitches. If you were doing this on double pointed needles, it would be actually quite easy to work at this point, because you'd have 2 things. You'd have a nice tight cast on and tight hole, and you'd have enough stitches that the double pointed needles wouldn't bounce around. There's my yarn over, there's my stitch, there's my yarn over, there's my stitch, there's my yarn over, there's my stitch. Oh, sugar! I picked up the tail. Time to tink. Just so you know, every one of us does this. Every one of us once in a while picks up the tail and knits with the tail. And even when we think we're paying attention, I have the disadvantage I'm working through the viewfinder of my camera and not working by looking at my knitting. And that does make it easier to make that kind of a mistake. So let me make sure I have a yarn over on my last stitch on the cable. Oops. And my stitch. And so I'm going to knit one, knit the yarn over, knit one, knit the yarn over, knit one. When I tinked, I obviously put the stitches on the needle backwards. It doesn't bother me. Knit one, yarn over, and turn my work. Bring the work to the other end of the needle. If you've not used magic loop, this is really not a tutorial on magic loop. This is really just a tutorial on working around. So we're going to knit one, knit a yarn over, knit one, knit a yarn over, knit one, knit a yarn over, knit one, knit my yarn over. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the work to the center, only because it becomes a little easier to see what I've accomplished. And when I bring it to the center, wow, look at that neat little cast on. It comes together really pretty. It really has a nice, neat, tight hole. We have a long tail on the back, and that hole will not undo. You can weave in the ends, but it will not loosen as you work. It will be a tight, neat cast on that will be a beautiful, tight little eyelet for your shawl, for your hat, for anything that you want to knit. And that's how you're going to do it, starting with a loop and yarn overs and into the loop, knits and yarn overs into the loop. I'm going to go on to show you another way of doing a tight, neat circle for your knitting in the round.